Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Pod Strickland. I'm your host, Shwinny Poo, and I'm joined not by Prez, who is out today, but I am joined by a first-time guest of the pod, but somebody I'm sure that anybody who is as online addicted as most people who listen to this podcast, I'm sure are familiar with. His name is Doug Berns. That is at Doug Lust, Duglust, on Twitter. Doug, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Shwinny Poo. Thanks for having me on, man. We've interacted on Twitter for years. I've enjoyed many of your takes and opinions on the Knicks, and it's cool to talk to you.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, and I've enjoyed all of your musical endeavors. We will call
Thank you.
them,
Thank
yes.
you.
An acquired taste. I don't know if you know, but like Locked On Knicks, they used to have James Marcita. He used to be the host, and he started he took over for Dubin. So Dubin's, all just like numbers, numbers, numbers.
Right.
And then Marcita took over and he was like doing all this musical stuff in the beginning. And I was like, at first I was like, dude, this is fucking awful. And then like it grows on you and you're like, oh, actually, this is kind of funny. And the first time I heard I heard one of your recaps, I was like, I don't know, maybe this just isn't for me. And then at some point I'm like, I think this is good. Like, I think this is good. I actually, but I think it's just it's pretty unique what you do. We're going to talk about that. We'll talk about a lot
Thanks,
of
man.
things.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it and appreciate your time. Uh, Before we do that, I do have to make a few announcements. First, being that Strickland has a YouTube channel where you may be watching this podcast. If you are, and you have not done so already, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment. That'd be a huge help to us. The Strickland also has merchandise, which you can find on our website at www.strict.land. There's a link that'll take you to the merchandise store, and there's all kinds of cool stuff on there, like t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, coffee mugs, water bottles, you name it, we've got it. The Strickland also has a Patreon, which you can subscribe to. There are a number of different tiers. There's a $6 tier that gives you access to Pot Strickland's podcast that I host every Friday with Prez. You also get access to Takes My Views Bozos, a podcast hosted by Andrew Steele, aka Doug, along with Zach Blatter, and you get access to the Strickland Discord where the conversation never stops. There are further tiers. There's a $9 tier that gets you access to Strickland all my solo pod right rant rant. But the next even more, you also get access to War Premium articles by Matthew Miranda, one of the best in the business, and you get access to Strictly NFL, which you guessed it is a podcast about the NFL that is hosted by Konstantin Metrikos and Desmond Novak. There are further tiers. There's $15 tier, $30 tier, $50 tier, and $100 tier. Those come with a variety of additional benefits, like listening in on pod recordings, merchandise discounts, and even potentially co-hosting a podcast alongside yours truly one day, whether you choose to subscribe or not. None of this would be possible without you. And none of this would be possible without us, I guess. I was actually going to do the bet online thing, but then I remembered we don't need to do the bet online thing anymore. So I'm not going to do that. All right. Look, the Knicks, they lost to the Celtics 119-117 in overtime. I'll get to this. Look, I've been really, really critical of Thibs and, whatever. I think people know what my takes are on Thibs. I think it's probably time to move on from him. I thought some of the discussion around him after this game was a little weird. Not so much because I thought he coached some awesome game, but it just wasn't really a game where I'm like, classic Thibs doing all the shit that I hate. I don't know. I thought it was fine. If you want to say that we need more than fine, look, I agree with that. But I just saw a lot of criticism after this game that I didn't totally understand. It was just a weird game for me to come away being super upset, and I'm not trying to do the moral victory thing like, oh well, the Knicks were right there with the Celtics, this is the best they've done. But I guess where I fall on this is I see all the conversation after the game, and I got to be honest, I didn't watch the game live. It's one of my friends is getting married this week, and Indian weddings are long, and since he's getting married, that basically means I'm getting married. So very involved in doing a lot of things, and don't feel bad for me. A lot of it is you just have to be there and eat food and drink alcohol, so it's not a terrible thing. But I did not watch this game live, so maybe that impacted kind of how I viewed it. But I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. But the way I felt after this game and just seeing the reactions from people is I understand being upset about this loss. I think it's obviously, anytime you lose to the Celtics, anytime you lose a game in overtime, a game that you look, if there is something to be critical about Thibs, I understand. I would have fouled at the end of regulation, but a game that you had kind of in your grasp slips away. I get that. But it felt like people are more because we're upset, right? That the Knicks have not, they got swept by the Celtics this year. They're 0-3 right now against the Cavs. They're 0-2 against OKC. They're 0-2 against the Warriors. They're 0-2 against the Lakers. Like, because of all of those things, it's like it's reached this boiling point where anytime you lose now to any of these teams, it's like, oh my God, this team is terrible. They can't be any good. They're not close to any of them. And, look, I don't love the excuse making that I've seen from some people, and even at times from this team, in terms of like, it was a back-to-back. Oh, we traveled a lot. Like, it's like, kind of shut up and just get the fucking win. But like, you do have to look at those circumstances, and like, yeah, I'm sorry. Like, we played Golden State, right? Both times, right? One time without Karl-Anthony Towns, the other time without Jalen Brunson. Like you did play, like, whatever. The point being is, like, I don't think this game was actually the reason people are upset. I think people are upset about all of it, and because the Knicks still lost this game, there's kind of like this need to like nitpick and what does this mean about like everything about this team. And I don't know, it feels like if even we had won one of those games previously, or two of those games, a couple of those games previously, I feel like the takeaways from this game are at least a lot more specific and I don't know how to put it, like, actually based on what happened in the game. Like, yeah, Karl-Anthony Towns was awesome on offense. He had no idea what he was doing on defense. Like, that's an actual criticism to throw at it. I don't think the criticism coming away from this game, or like the takeaway coming away from this game, is that the Knicks are like miles away from the best teams in the league, and again, not to do the moral victory thing, but if there is something to take away from this game that is positive, I think it's simply that, like, look, man, if the Knicks actually like come into these games prepared, focused, and ready to go, they can compete against these teams. And that doesn't mean they're going to beat, like, I don't think they would beat the Celtics in a series, but assuming we play them, which looks likely, in the second round, assuming we win a first round series, like, I would like to go into that series and come away from it at minimum being like, okay, look, maybe the Knicks didn't win, but they, now we can kind of see, all right, there's like these 2 or 3 things that we need to add here in the summer, and that will change things. Versus when we've played them before, it's like, oh my God, we need to play, like, we need to trade everybody on the roster. This is awful. But yeah, that's kind of like what I thought coming away from the game. I don't know what your thoughts were. Maybe you can sing them for us.
Well, you can go see my I did a Papa Roach song because I did Last Resort to summarize my feelings on that game, because I did feel like the game was really within the Knicks' grasp and there were a few brain cramps. See, here's the issue with the way, in my opinion, I don't think there's one, like, the reason we lost is Thibs did this, or the reason we lost is this one mistake. There were a series of little paper cuts that happened in crunch time, like I think it was Peyton Pritchard spring wide open for the first possession. Like you can't, like, you got to pay attention on the side out of bounds. You can't let Peyton Pritchard have an open layup. You can't let the ball go off your face when you have a chance to tie the game. Another thing that baffles me about the way that game ended, from a coaching look, I think the whole narrative around Thibs is a little out of control, right? We can't do the Mike Malone, Taylor Jenkins thing. That's absurd. We can't do that. It's not the way that's going to work within this franchise. The thing with Thibs is you ride with the Thibs system no matter what. So you're never going to expect him to throw you any curveballs. And the way that I saw that bear out in this game against the Celtics was in overtime. Joe Mazzulla, who does all this, like, the work is mysterious and important shit to, like, mess with people's brains, he started overtime with Luke Cornett instead of Porzingis. And to me, that was actually, it annoyed me at the time, because I was like, all right, dude, like, we see how smart and brilliant and different of a coach you are. But at the same time, Thibs did the thing where my group throughout overtime is going to be the starters, no matter what happens, no matter the situation, no matter what the Celtics are doing offensively, that I could counter with Deuce, I could counter with Mitch. I'm just going to stick with the starters just because that's what I think I have to do. That's the kind of thing. And then what Mazzulla did was he brought Porzingis back in with like 3 minutes left in overtime. And then Porzingis has now had a rest. And then Porzingis has the legs to shoot a fucking logo 3 to bury us. So it's this kind of stuff that like I don't hate Thibs. I don't like want to see him thrown out the door. It's just the stuff that those things that other coaches do. Like Joe Mazzulla is probably coach of the year, but it's frustrating sometimes to have a coach that will never go into a bag quite like that. Also, DeLon Wright, DNP, is he going to make a huge difference in that game? I don't know, but I do think that the way he played while Brunson was out, you have to wonder, like, why would you just completely shelve him? Is that what has to happen now because Campaign is healthy again? So these are the questions I wonder about going into the playoffs. I also agree with you that like the discussion around top team competition for the Knicks is super decontextualized, super Knicks for clicks out at this point. Like every game, there's a reason why the Knicks came out flat, or the Knicks are missing, or they're missing X player, or they had a very unusual like aberration of a shooting performance in the first quarter. So there's all these things that kind of like play into all these L's. And I think the main positive from that game is if you get that representative effort in a 7-game series from the Knicks, there's a puncher's chance. So and also the specific coaching thing that I think was done right, and maybe this was Brunson and Towns making this decision on the floor together, or maybe it was something that Thibs thought about before the game. So I want to give him credit for that. Was Mazzulla tried to throw guards at Towns as if that was going to throw him off his game, and Towns did a phenomenal job of backing down. Like I don't think I've seen him in a concerted stretch of a game play with his back to the basket like that to such great effect. Like those baby hooks he shot like, I don't know, 60% on those shots. So that's just, that's eye test, but point being, like when Porzingis is out there, they're not putting him on Towns. They're putting White and they're putting Holiday on Towns to be different and crazy and Joe Mazzulla and whatever. And Towns said, screw that, bro. I'm 7 feet tall. I'm 250 pounds. Let me take advantage. So I think from a coaching perspective, that's a huge plus. More Deuce, more Mitch. Maybe you find a way to work DeLon right into the rotation. I don't know. But aggregators or whoever's watching this, don't take me out of context and make it seem like I'm saying DeLon Wright is the answer to the Knicks winning an NBA Finals.
So we're going to talk the rest of this podcast about how DeLon Wright is the answer.
Okay, great.
No, look, I think, yeah, like, look, I think, yeah, there's a few things going on. One, like you mentioned, I think there's a general, like, it's so, I think the most annoying thing about this season has been, it's like, I don't know how many ways I can have the same exact conversations I've had about Thibs as a coach and his decision making and the things he does. Like I'm so tired of it. I've been like we've kind of been doing it for 5 years, but last year was weird, right? It was like you had all these injuries and they're shorthanded and they're still kind of fighting and scrapping. It made like the last couple of months of the season, and there was just a lot of change that happened throughout the course of the year, right? Like they trade for OG Anunoby, so all of a sudden in the middle of the season we're like, all right, well, this is new, this is different. And then by the time like they were really clicking, and I guess they were kind of clicking right from the jump, but once they're like, they play for a month and then it's like, oh, but actually Julius Randle and OG Anunoby are going to die right now. And then you have this weirdo stretch of the season where they're just kind of like scrapping and getting by and kind of trying to muck it up and win games. Then you kind of get healthy before the playoffs, and then the playoffs are their own thing. And it was just like its own thing. So you almost like forgot about Thibs conversations in a lot of ways, or at least they were just very different in a lot of ways last year. And then you come back to this season and it's like, oh yeah, no, I remember all these famous battlegrounds. But yeah, like so there's that piece of it where it's like, I think there's we all know what there is to know about Thibs, and there's people that believe that the things he does, and he does, contrary to popular belief of some people who want him fired, like there are things that Thibs does that are good. Like, so the people that are like, Thibs is no way we can fire him, we have to upgrade the roster, blah, blah, blah. It's like those people they like what they like about Thibs and they value that over the things that, maybe either they don't think he does poorly or agree does poorly, but doesn't outweigh the good. And then there are people, and I am part of this group that are over Thibs. And, I think there are people that are over Thibs who are like, no, I'm thankful that he was our coach, but I think it's time to move on. And I consider myself part of that group. And then there are people that are like, the worst thing that's ever happened is Thibs was ever a coach. And I don't fully understand that, but what it is. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. So there's that going on. And then there's also the Knicks have made all these big moves, right? They traded for OG Anunoby. They traded all their picks for Mikal Bridges, and they traded another pick that they found on the couch and Dante DiVincenzo and Randall for Cat. So you have so now you're at this point where you have cashed in a lot of your chips, and so the stakes are higher, right? You're playing not for anything really other than the ability to compete for championships. And I don't think that pressure has not been there in previous seasons because the Knicks hadn't made their biggest acquisitions or moves yet. Even last year, sure, they traded for OG Anunoby, but you still had all your first round picks. You still had picks from other teams. You hadn't kind of cashed in at that level. Now you have, so the stakes are higher. So it's not it's not as fun when you just go on a 5-game winning streak and beat a bunch of teams by 15 points. It's well, that's what we're supposed to do. And so there's not as much joy in the actual regular season. And then look, the record is what it is. The Knicks have not beaten the Cavs. So they're 0-3 against the Cavs, 0-4 against the Celtics, 0-2 against OKC, 0-2 against the Lakers, 0-2 against the Warriors. Those are 5 teams that I think most people believe have a chance, or more than a chance in many of those cases, but chance to compete for a championship. So you're 0-13 or whatever the fuck it was. 0-13 against these teams. That's 13 of your 29 losses. So the other 16 losses, they're all sprinkled, throughout, right? You get 2 against the Pistons, 1 against this team, 1 against that team, whatever. It's sprinkled throughout, but those don't bother you as much as the fact that you're 0-13 against these teams that are really good. And the point of this team that we've assembled is to be really good. Now, I think that I understand all of that frustration. It was just a weird thing for me to watch that game after kind of seeing what people were talking about after the game. I mean, I kind of don't feel like this is the game to just be everything is horrible. We need to trade everybody. Thibs sucks. I came away from that game being Thibs does some things that annoy me still. And to your point, the thing that I think is really frustrating about Thibs is he's not a coach where it's you're ever discussing new things. It's the same exact shit over and over and over again. So I'm just, I don't know. I feel like there's no point talking about it anymore because I've just felt how I felt now for a while. And look, I would have fired him after the 2021-22 season for sure. I would have fired him after the 2023 playoffs after they lost to Miami. I'm on record of saying that at the time, both times. They didn't. Last year, I think he did a hell of a job. He deservedly got an extension based on that. But I'm kind of back to being the old me, and I'm yeah, I think it's probably time to move on. But that's a conversation for the end of the season. And I liked what you said about Taylor Jenkins and Mike Malone, because look, even if those guys deserve to be fired, and I don't watch the fucking Nuggets, or definitely not the fucking Grizzlies, nearly enough to have a strong take on that. But maybe those guys deserve to be fired. That's fine. I will never, I think it's absolutely stupid to fire either of a coach in either of those team situations as close as they did to the playoffs. I would actually be really pissed if the Knicks fired Thibs today. I'd be okay, what the fuck is the point of this? This is literally, you're not going to get anything from this. So we're going to have interim head coach Rick fucking Brunson. What are we learning from that? There's nothing to learn from this. There's nothing to gain from that. And I'd just be pissed about that. So, look, whatever I think about Thibs and whatever anybody thinks about Thibs or this team, one, I don't think this game against the Celtics was particularly a thing that it did not raise red flags for me as far as, well, this is why the Knicks can't compete. If anything, it was kind of like a game where you're see, it's clear the Knicks can at least stay in touch with these teams and potentially, like you said, have a puncher's chance in a playoff series. And then the other thing is again, you're gonna have you have whatever 3 games to end the regular season. I figure the Knicks are gonna win at least one of these at some point, and they'll clinch the 3 seed, or the Pacers will lose one at some point. Maybe not, because apparently the Pacers never lose basketball games anymore. Whatever. So we'll see what happens, right? They should win their first round series, and then we'll see what happens in a second round series. Because what I have thought, and this is like, again, I think it's probably time to move on from Thibs, but if you play a series against the Celtics and it is competitive, like it is, like, let's say a 6-game series, maybe you can take it to a 7th game. Who knows? If that's how it works, I don't think the Knicks are competitive unless Thibs does a good job. Like, that's really what I think. Like, I don't think they can be competitive against the Celtics if Thibs does a bad job. And if Thibs does a good job, then I think it raises a lot of interesting conversations, because whatever happens in the regular season, kind of, it's its own thing, right? It's not the playoffs. It's different beast. But you'd have to, like, even if you're the most anti-Thibs person, if they're competitive against the Celtics, who I think most people feel were the best team in the East, at least coming into the season, and I still feel that way. I think it warrants, maybe at least revisiting what everybody's stance is at that point on Thibs. But the point is, like, he has the opportunity to kind of, like, at least for me, change how I feel about him over these next whatever month and a half, hopefully, maybe longer, hopefully much longer, hopefully 2 fucking months. That'd be great. 2.5 months of more of Knicks basketball would be nice. But he has that chance, and I think it's worth kind of forgetting some of these worn out and tired arguments we're having about Thibs, and kind of focus more on, like, all right, let's just get to the playoffs, and then let's clean slate it and see what he does from there. Now, that could also work against him, right? Like, if you lose in the first round of fucking Detroit, and no shade to them, like, they've had a great season and they're clearly on the right trajectory now, but, like, the Knicks should be beating the Pistons in a playoff series. And if you don't, I'm sorry, like, I don't see how the Knicks can possibly lose a series to the Pistons if Thibs does a good job. If he does a good job, there's almost no way I see the Pistons losing a series. But if they do, the Knicks do lose a series to the Pistons, I almost think it's certain that Thibs did a lot of things that we're both going to be like, what? And yeah, like, to your point, it would be nice to see him use guys like Deuce situationally, and more so than Deuce. The Dylan Wright thing is, I think, an interesting point and worth talking about, where it's like, you see a lot of other coaches, you see Missoula do this all the time, right? Where he's just like, yeah, I'm going to try that. Like, I think there was a game where they played us at, like, the Garden this year, where, like, Nemias Keita completely, like, fucking, he had, like, a nice run against us. And I'm trying to think to myself, I'm like, would Thibs, like, ever just throw out, like, his third big guy out there in a night, unless it's foul trouble? Like, would he ever just give a guy a shot? And I think that's the Dylan Wright point, where you're like, look, maybe I don't think we want him starting, obviously, with Brunson back, and I don't think he needs to always play. But is he somebody who should sometimes play in certain situations in games? But, like, that's kind of the thing with Thibs, right? And I think that's definitely, I think that's worth, like, discussing more, because it is I think that is the kind of, I don't want to say it's the all of what is frustrating about Thibs, but it kind of is a very specific thing, that almost it exemplifies all the frustrations I think people have with Thibs.